Hey, what's up guys, it's James Diamond here and welcome back to the next episode of my uplifting trance tutorial series here on Sonic Academy. Over the last couple of episodes we were looking at some transition and sound effects, how to use some samples to kind of create a cool new drum fill instead of kind of just using one individual fill, putting a couple together to make something cool and interesting, and then using the samples for the uplifters and the downlifters. So at the moment we've got a very nice foundation for our track and we're going to start moving on to some more melodic elements. And this episode we're going to be looking at creating an intro pluck, which we'll use later on when it comes to actually structuring out the project. So for our pluck we're going to be using Silent, of course, and it will be linked to our mixer channel, and I've got the effects preloaded. Of course they're all default settings. So for the time being, I'm just going to add a couple of notes into the piano roll so we can use that as our kind of basis when we're creating this sound. Let's just copy these across. Okay, perfect. Alright, so let's now just clear this patch. And now let's look to actually begin to produce this pluck. So we're going to use a sawtooth wave and we're going to add some 8 voices. And let me just bring down B, and let me just bring down the volume of oscillator 2. Very standard, not much in it at the moment. So let's just add a little bit of detune. Already you can start to hear that it's getting a bit more plucky. Let's add another sawtooth, 8 voices, and let's add just a little bit more detune. So that's sounding nice. Now let's add on our filters. Nothing too interesting at the moment, so let's link the filter to the modulation envelope. We'll pull the sustain all the way down. Let's pull the decay up a little bit, and then the modulation amount. So that's starting to sound more like a pluck. Let's go up to our amp envelope and let's pull the sustain down, and let's just pull decay up a little bit. Starting to sound quite nice. And let's go to our modulation envelope 2 and let's add just a little bit. Let's add a little bit of overdrive and we'll use the decimate one. Pull the dry wet knob all the way down to dry and all the amount all the way down to 0 as well. Let's just add a little bit of wet and we'll start bringing up on the amount. So that sounds quite nice. Now let's link the distortion to the key tracking. So we go onto our source, which is the key track, and then we go to distortion amount, and we're just going to up the source, kind of the send effect just a little bit here. And then let's control it with the key track. And maybe let's just pull down on the filter a little bit more. So that's starting to sound a little bit more like a pluck. I'm liking the sound of that at the moment. As you can probably tell, I'm not exactly an expert when it comes to synthesis, but I do like to try. So let's maybe add a little bit of EQ. So just a little bit of high in there as well. Okay, cool. That sounds about right. So let's go in and have a look at the MIDI that we want to be working with. So I want to do kind of like a classic sounding pluck. So I'm going to have a look and see what I can come up with in terms of that. So I think let's just shorten all of these notes up for a start. So that sounds quite nice, but it's very standard, so let's just knock these last two notes down. No, clearly that's not sounding very good, so let's try going up a couple of notes. Very much trial and error. Working in the key of E, so E minor would be E, G, B. So we've got the two top notes of the E chord. That's starting to sound a bit more like it. Yeah, that's definitely sound a little bit more like a classic trance kind of riff. So we're going to be using that for the intro. Yep, liking the sound of that. All right, let's put this into our project. So we're just going to choose the Pluck clip. And then now let's just play with the kick and the bass just to see how it sounds. So it's sounding nice, the sound is really nice, but I don't like the way that it sits within the mix. So let's have a look and see what we can do with that. The first thing I'm going to do is turn on the sidechain because I like to kind of EQ and feel what the sound is going to be like with the sidechain on before I've actually done any of the EQ and the delay and things like that. And straight away you can hear that that's sitting much better in the mix. Let's add our EQ and let's cut off the low end, of course. And then we just want to boost in the middle to kind of bring out the sound a bit. Maybe try knocking it down an octave. No, it's a bit too low. Maybe let's try knocking down the top two notes down an octave. Still too low. Okay, let's go with what we've got now and see if we can play around with the filters to make it sound a little bit better. I think that's sitting a little bit better. So let's add some delay. And we're going to go ping pong, input pan to the left as normal, offset to the right. And let's just see how it sounds with the standard 3 setting. It sounds alright, but it kind of sounds like some of the delay sounds, some of the ping pong is kind of overlapping with the notes. So maybe let's change it to 2 and see if that could kind of push the delayed sound out the way of the original signal. Yeah, that's much better. It kind of, like I said, it pushed the delay, so it was delaying at a different time rate to the actual kind of MIDI notes. So what I was looking for there, I was wanting the delay to kind of be playing in these sections where the notes aren't actually playing. Whereas before, some of the delayed notes were actually overlapping with the original signal. So that was kind of causing a double up in the sound and a bit of phasing. So let's add some reverb. And of course, we're going to bring up the low cut. And I'll just play around with the settings to see what works best. I think that sounds quite nice. The pre-delay really helped there just to kind of push the initial reverb sounds slightly away from the initial signal of the synths, and quite a slowish, I would say, decay, and a little bit of high. I pulled the high cut up a little bit just so we hear a little bit more of the high end. Okay, so it sounds nice with just the kick and bass, but really we need to kind of mix it in with the rest of the track to see how that sounds. So I'm just going to mute everything else, or unmute it, and let's have a listen. I'm really liking the way that that sits in the mix at the moment. A very kind of classic, maybe kind of Paul van Dyk Vandit type pluck. I've got the Blood Overdrive here loaded because I was playing around with this to see if it would help kind of add a little bit more kind of aggressiveness to the sound. So let's just try that. Yeah, that really helps. That just kind of lifts the kind of high end, a bit of the mid out just a little bit more. I am going to try and move it again as well after the reverb and delay. So then the Blood Overdrive is going to be working on the original synthesizer and the delay and the reverb. So let's see how that sounds. I'm not so sure about that. It's kind of increasing the amount of reverb and delay just a little bit too much for my liking. So let's leave it at the beginning and hopefully that should be good. Really liking the way that sounds at the moment. Maybe let's just go back to the MIDI and just play around with it one last time. I'm thinking that maybe we could bring up the last couple of notes. Yeah, I'm liking that. That adds a little bit more movement into the MIDI. Yeah, definitely. That gives it a little bit more variation and just makes it a little bit more interesting. It's going to be one last thing that I'm going to try, and I'm going to add some compression after all of my effects, and quite importantly after the sidechain as well. So obviously we're adding the sidechain to create the pumping effect, and what we're going to do, adding some compression after the sidechain, is it's going to decrease the pumping effect. It's going to make it sound less, but it's also going to kind of bring up all of the other sounds that were kind of the volume was brought down when the sidechain compression was in effect. So for example, if I show in visual terms, all of these sounds down here are obviously a lot quieter than what's being played when it's up here. What I'm going to do with the compressor, I'm going to say compress by a couple of dB, which will bring the level down to about this first line here. So all of these sounds will get a little bit quieter, and as a consequence, it will sound like the sounds down the bottom here will get a little bit louder. Kind of hard to explain, but it's kind of the basis of compression. So let's do a reasonably soft compression at a 2:1 ratio. Let's maybe give it a 3 millisecond attack and a short release. So it's a very, very subtle difference, but I can definitely hear that some of the kind of reverb and delay is kind of being pulled up a bit, and it's leveling off some of the sounds. The lower kind of parts are getting a little bit kind of tighter and a little bit louder, and it's kind of helping the high end to come through a little bit more. So let's just try that in the mix. Yeah, so that was definitely helping within the mix. It was making it sound like it was less kind of jumpy up and down with the sidechain, but it was also kind of bringing up some of those quieter sounds that I mentioned before. So some of the frequencies and the sounds that were down kind of at this volume have now been brought up just a little bit because we've brought down the top part, the louder volume. And it's also kind of, like I said, decreasing the amount of sidechain, but it's also making it sound a bit more natural. It was a little bit too jumpy before. So I'll just play it once again and turn the sidechain on and off so you can hear what it sounds like. So keep a listen out for the way that the groove of these, the Pluck doesn't kind of jump up and down as much, and some of the extra kind of harmonics and the delay and the reverb is kind of coming through the mix a little bit more when the compressor is on. So I'm really liking the sound of that. That fits much, much better into the mix now, with just a couple of different settings and, you know, an extra compressor on the end to really kind of help meld it all together. A very, very simple Pluck. It really wasn't that hard to make. Even I could do it. Someone who is completely beginner to synthesis, really. Very, very easy. So what I love about Silent, that the user interface is incredibly easy to use, and you get very good results from it as well. So that's about it from this episode. Stay tuned, as over the next few and remaining episodes we're going to be looking at more melodic elements, and we're also going to be structuring out the track. I'll see you then. Cheers.